It all started with a story. I was sitting in the back of the classroom, my legs stretched out under the desk, smirking as the new teacher, Ms. Evelyn, told us about Pinocchio. She had a haunting way of speaking, her voice soft but piercing, as if it could slice through your lies and expose every hidden truth.
Lies,
she said.
Don't just twist the world around you. They twist you. They reshape you into something you don't recognize.
I rolled my eyes. Cool story, miss, but we're not 5 anymore. The class chuckled, and I basked in the attention. I was Beano, the untouchable. My dad's money kept me safe no matter what I did. That afternoon, Jim became my target again. Skinny, quiet, and always an easy pick. Hey, Jimmy boy, I called, snatching the milk carton from his hands. Before he could react, I dumped it over his head.
Stop, please!
Jim's voice cracked as he wiped milk from his face. But mercy wasn't my style. As he tried to escape, I loaded my slingshot with a small stone. But Jim turned at the last second. For a second, I just stood there, the slingshot slack in my hand. Then the fear kicked in. My heart pounded, but I did what I always did. I walked away. Let someone else find him. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Jim falling replayed in my mind. When I finally drifted off, I woke up to a strange stiffness in my legs. I threw back the covers and gasped. My left leg was straight, rigid, and unnaturally smooth. Running my hand over it, I realized with growing horror, it felt like polished wood. This isn't real, I muttered. Pulling on a pair of jeans, I forced myself to act normal. All the attention that morning was on Jim. Whispers circulated about how he'd been found unconscious, hospitalized with no sign of waking up. My stomach twisted. Surely that couldn't be my fault. Could it? Then the police showed up. They questioned everyone going down the line of students. My stomach churned as they got closer.
Beano?
One officer said, his pen poised.
Where were you after school yesterday?
I swallowed hard. The truth clawed at my throat, but I couldn't admit it. Not when my dad's reputation, my safety, everything was on the line. I went straight home, I lied. Pain shot up to my shoulder as I looked down. My fingers were locking into place, the skin taking on the same unnatural wooden texture as my leg. I clutched my arm, hiding it behind my back. That's all I know. The officer nodded and moved on, but the damage was done. I darted behind the school building, my breath ragged. I checked my hand. It was wooden, my fingers stiff, immobile. A voice behind me made me jump.
Beano, are you all right?
I turned to see Ms. Evelyn. Her gaze was sharp, too knowing. She asked if I knew anything about Jim's injury. I shook my head, denying it again. But with every word, I felt my body stiffen further, my chest constricting like it was encased in a wooden cage. Ms. Evelyn's eyes bore into me, and she said softly,
Beano, lying won't save you. I can't help if you don't tell the truth.
At home, my dad was waiting, his usual stern expression fixed on me.
Sit down,
he ordered. I obeyed, my legs creaking like ancient floorboards.
What happened at school today?
I hesitated. The room seemed to close in around me. Nothing, Dad. Just a normal day. The wooden transformation surged. My hands froze mid-air. My face stiffened as my nose began to stretch outward. Enough! I blurted, tears spilling. "It's my fault! Jim is hurt because of me! I didn't mean to!" But my confession did little to soften my father's gaze.
Does anyone else know?
He asked coldly. "Miss Evelyn," I admitted. She suspects everything." For a moment, my father said nothing. The silence was unbearable. I dreaded these moments, the calm before the storm. Maybe I had gone too far this time. Maybe I'd finally done something even he couldn't protect me from. "I'm sorry, Dad. Tomorrow I'll go to the police. I'll tell them everything." I dropped to my knees, pleading for his forgiveness. I regret what I did, and all the lies." He rose slowly, his movements unnervingly stiff. Under the flickering light, his shadow warped and stretched, revealing something monstrous. My heart froze. His true form emerged, a towering wooden puppet, his face rigid and eerily lifeless.
We don't lie, Bino. We create the truth.
As he spoke, his nose began to extend, the wooden grain cracking as it grew longer. Without a word, he opened a drawer, pulling out a rusty saw. In one swift, he sliced through the wooden length of his nose. "Dad, what are you doing?"
She'll be handled. You'll learn, just as I did.
As he left, his wooden joints creaking, I sat there, paralyzed. The next day, Miss Evelyn didn't show up. Rumours spread, but no one had answers. I knew, though. Dad had silenced her. More unsettling was the slow realisation that other staff members, teachers, the principal, moved with that same stilted stiffness. They were like me, or worse, like my father. At break time, my friends asked,
Do you know what happened to Miss Evelyn?
I hesitated. My wooden fingers tapped against the table. No idea. I would never escape. A puppet, bound by strings I couldn't see, forever performing the lies I told.
I had been searching for her for what felt like a lifetime. Snow White, the princess of the neighboring kingdom. Stories of her beauty spread like wildfire through the lands. But it wasn't until a diplomatic visit to her castle that I saw her for the first time. It was fleeting, just a moment in passing. But in that instant, my heart belonged to her. She was unlike anyone I had ever seen, a vision of purity and grace. I returned to her kingdom soon after, but the Snow White I had seen was no longer at the castle. I heard whispers from the servants, rumours of an evil queen and a terrible curse. They said Snow White had fallen under the spell of the queen's dark magic and had disappeared, her fate uncertain. Dead or alive, no one knew for sure. I had to find her. The thought of her suffering, or worse, gone forever, haunted my every waking moment. It was all I could think about. So I ventured into the deep forest, where I heard she was lying in a strange, enchanted sleep, guarded by the 7 dwarves who once sheltered her. When I arrived at the clearing, my heart raced. There she was, inside a glass coffin, her body untouched by time or decay. Snow White lay as if merely sleeping, her beauty preserved, unblemished by death. Her skin was still as pale as snow, her lips red like blood, and her hair black as ebony. She was perfect. My heart swelled with purpose. The dwarfs told me that only the kiss of true love could break the curse. I didn't hesitate. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of destiny pressing down on me. I knelt beside her and lowered my lips to hers, pressing them against the cold softness of her mouth. But the kiss felt wrong. Her lips were as cold as ice, like kissing the surface of a frozen lake. Still, I refused to believe anything could be wrong. This was a fairy tale. I was her prince. My kiss would wake her, and we would live happily ever after. The dwarfs watched in silence, and I waited. But nothing happened. No flutter of eyelashes, no breath of life. She remained still. I couldn't accept it. I was meant to save her. So I took her from the glass coffin, carried her fragile body back to my kingdom, and declared her my bride. No one dared object, though many whispered behind closed doors that something was deeply wrong. They didn't understand. They couldn't feel what I felt. I loved her. She was my Snow White, and nothing would change that. At the palace, I dressed her in the finest gowns, sat her by my side at the grand dining table, and arranged her hair each morning. Her lips, which I painted a deep red, stood out against the paleness of her skin. I made sure she looked as beautiful as ever. But she never moved. She never spoke. Her glassy eyes stared at me, unblinking, unseeing. At night, I would hold her cold body close, whispering to her about the life we would build once the curse finally broke. But as the days passed, I began to feel something strange. A weakness in my body, a sickness creeping under my skin. At first, it was just fatigue, but soon sores began to appear, red, festering wounds. And I wasn't the only one. The servants grew sick too, their skin cracking and bleeding. The palace became a house of rot. Whispers spread through the kingdom. People began to say that Snow White was cursed, that her lifeless body was spreading the plague. They wanted her gone. They feared her, called her a harbinger of disease, and demanded that she be destroyed. But I couldn't let them take her from me. She was my princess, my bride, and I loved her more than anything. Yet, as my body weakened and the sores multiplied, I could no longer stand against the growing mob. One night, they stormed the palace, dragging Snow White's lifeless body from her bed. I screamed at them to stop, but my voice was weak, barely more than a rasp. They took her deep into the forest and built a pyre. I couldn't let my Snow White suffer like that. I pushed myself from the bed, ignoring the pain tearing through my limbs, and ran after them, the world spinning around me. By the time I reached the clearing, flames were already licking at the edges of her gown. The heat was unbearable, but I couldn't stop myself. I rushed into the fire, ignoring the screams of the villagers. Snow White lay in the center of the inferno, her face still calm and beautiful despite the flames consuming her. I reached for her, pulling her into my arms, but as I held her, her body began to disintegrate. Her perfect skin crumbled into ash beneath my fingers, her beautiful face turning to dust. The harder I clutched her, the more she fell apart, until all that was left of my Snow White was a pile of grey, lifeless ash. In the end, all I could do was hold on to the ashes of my beloved, even as the flames consumed me.
The air above the water was different, sharp, filled with 1,000 new scents I had never known before. I had no voice to scream. I couldn't call out. The witch had taken it in exchange for these legs that made every step feel like fire. The pain was searing, as if a knife was splitting me from tail to toe. I saw him approach, a large, grizzled man with eyes hard as stones. His skin was worn from the salt and wind of the sea, and his lips twisted into a cruel smile when he saw me.
Well, what do we have here?
I wanted to speak, to explain that I needed his help. I only had 3 days to find the prince, to kiss him, and seal my fate as a human forever. But I couldn't make a sound. I reached out, pleading with my eyes. He laughed, a low, wicked sound that sent shivers down my spine.
Can't speak, huh? That's fine. I don't need words from a catch like you.
I tried to scramble away, but my legs, my new cursed legs, were weak and unsteady. Before I could escape, his hands were on me. They were rough, tearing at my skin. I wasn't a princess here. I wasn't even a person. I was just another piece of meat in his catch. When he was done, he dragged me ashore, then the town, straight to a market where people bought and sold lives. He handed me over to the highest bidder. I was trapped in this world, with legs that hurt and a voice that was lost. I once dreamed that the human world was beautiful and admirable, but it seems I was mistaken. They took me, bound my wrists, pushed me into dark corners, forced me to carry heavy stones, to work until my body was covered in bruises and welts. Even my legs burned from the brand they seared into my skin, punishing me. They were once a symbol of my dream, had become a curse. They didn't see me for what I was, a lost soul searching for love. They only saw a thing to exploit. Days passed, or maybe it was only hours. Time had become a blur of pain and exhaustion. And then I saw him, my prince. He was there, walking through the market, his golden hair catching the light. I had found him. My salvation was right in front of me. If I could just get to him, if I could kiss him, this nightmare would be over. I stumbled forward, my legs barely holding me. But before I could reach him, hands grabbed me, yanking me back. I was thrown to the ground, beaten for daring to approach royalty. I cried silently, tears mixing with the dirt on my face. They chained me, binding my feet together, and I couldn't even run. My legs, once my dream, had become my prison. Later, when they released me, I found myself staring out at the ocean. The waves called to me, whispering of home, of the freedom I had once known. I wiped away a tear. I had thought being human would make me happy. But it was not as it seemed. I didn't have much time left. The 3rd day was nearly over. Soon I would return to the sea, tail and voice restored. And then he was there. The prince. He approached me, touched my shoulder. His eyes filled with kindness, confusion.
Are you all right?
This was it. The moment I had waited for. The kiss that would make me human forever. I leaned forward, desperate to kiss him, to end this curse. But before our lips could touch, rough hands grabbed me once more. The guards pulled me away, slamming me to the ground.
How dare a slave touch the prince?
They shouted. The blows came fast and hard, my body racked with pain. And then it happened. Before their eyes, I felt the transformation begin. The legs that had caused me so much torment melted away. The delicate scales returned, shimmering in the dull light of the setting sun. They gasped in horror. I was no longer a woman, no longer a slave. I was a creature from the depths, a monster in their eyes.
A human with a fishtails!
Someone cried.
A beast!
Kill it, and the prize is yours.
I couldn't believe I was hearing those words from the person I had been waiting for all this time. The crowd turned on me, their faces twisted with fear and hatred. They descended like wolves, tearing at me, fighting each other to claim a piece of the prize. "Please," I cried, my voice hoarse. I begged, but they didn't hear me, or they ignored me. My body once again at the mercy of those who saw me as nothing more than an object to be used, a curiosity to be destroyed. They beat me, their hatred pouring out with every blow. I felt bones snap, skin tear, but I didn't fight back. I had no strength left. From afar, I saw the prince standing there. He did nothing. And then he smiled as they tore me to peace. And then the darkness swallowed me whole.